At approximately 11 a.m. on February 2026, a man walked out of his home in Albuquerque's Northeast Heights and disappeared. That man was retired Air Force Major General William Neal McCasland. This is the control tower at Kirtland Air Force Base, a landmark in the defense landscape McCasland navigated for decades. As the former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, he oversaw a global workforce and a multi-billion-dollar budget dedicated to advanced space systems, directed energy, and classified propulsion programs. When his wife returned an hour later, the house was quiet. His cell phone, his prescription glasses, and his wearable tech were all sitting inside. Only his hiking boots and a .38 caliber handgun were missing. A man who spent his career managing the most sophisticated tracking and command systems in the world had managed to step off the grid in broad daylight without leaving a single digital or physical trail. Mapped out, McCasland is the latest in a sequence of missing or dead U.S. defense experts stretching to 2023. By July 2024, the timeline highlights Frank Mywald. A high-level NASA scientist, Mywald died at 61 with no public cause of death or autopsy released. At JPL, Mywald specialized in high-frequency electronics and mass spectrometry, the exact tools used to detect chemical signatures of life in the plumes of distant moons like Enceladus. In June 2025, aerospace material scientist Monica Reza vanished while hiking in the Angeles National Forest. She was trailing just 30 feet behind a companion when she simply dropped out of sight. This image of a rocket engine nozzle shows the extreme heat environment her research addressed. Reza co-invented Mondaloy, a nickel-based superalloy developed with Air Force funding to ensure next-generation rocket engines could withstand oxygen-rich combustion without burning up. The vanishing of McCasland and Reza represents a specific, sequential loss of institutional knowledge regarding deep space instrumentation and advanced strategic propulsion. The pattern extends into the nuclear periphery, specifically around Los Alamos National Laboratory, the primary site for U.S. nuclear weapons design. In early 2025, 2 people tied to the lab's orbit disappeared. Anthony Chavez, a former employee, left his keys and wallet on his counter and walked away. Weeks later, Melissa Cassius, an administrative assistant with access to sensitive areas, was seen walking along a highway and never returned. By late 2025, the academic pipeline for these defense programs was targeted. Nuno Loureiro, a professor at MIT, was shot and killed at his home in Massachusetts. This is the interior of a fusion reactor, the centerpiece of Loureiro's professional world. As director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, he led research into advanced fusion energy and the physics required to sustain it. By mapping these targets, we see a concentrated loss of expertise across space surveillance, strategic launch propulsion, and advanced nuclear energy. Beyond their classified clearances, the missing individuals share a recurring set of physical and digital signatures. Investigators call it the severed tether. In nearly every case, the subjects left on foot, abandoning their cars, keys, wallets, and phones, the very objects that normally facilitate movement or allow for tracking. Then comes the digital silence. When Melissa Casillas vanished, reports indicated her mobile devices were wiped of data the moment she was last seen. Despite massive search operations involving helicopters and specialized ground teams, no remains, clothing, or gear have been recovered for Reza, Casillas, Chavez, or McCasland. They disappeared without leaving a single physical trace in the environment. In the search for General McCasland, deputies knocked on more than 600 doors and coordinated with the FBI and Kirtland Air Force Base. The only physical evidence recovered in the entire multi-agency effort was a single gray Air Force sweatshirt found in open terrain over a mile from his home. Officially, authorities continue to treat these as isolated events, misadventures in the mountains, random acts of violence, or private tragedies. But when the architects of the nation's most sensitive aerospace and energy programs vanish in such a precise sequence, the question shifts from how they left to who currently holds the knowledge they took with them. On the evening of December 15, 2025, Nuno Loureiro was shot multiple times at his home in Brookline, Massachusetts. 2 months later, Carl Grillmeyer was killed on his front porch in a remote area of the California desert. Both men were leaders in their fields. Loureiro was an MIT professor and director of the Plasma Science and Fusion Center, harnessing star-like energy. Grillmeyer was a Caltech astrophysicist whose work mapped the distribution of dark matter from major NASA telescope missions. Officially, these deaths are treated as standalone criminal sequences. Local authorities identified specific suspects in both cases, a Portuguese national in Brookline and a trespassing neighbor in California, closing the files as isolated tragedies. But outside the local precincts, a different picture is being assembled. Since mid-2024, 10 American experts with access to the nation's most sensitive nuclear and aerospace materials have either died violently or disappeared into thin air. By April 15, 2026, the count had grown high enough to reach the highest level of the American government. During a briefing at the White House, Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy confronted the administration, asking if anyone was investigating the links between these 10 scientists and their shared access to classified nuclear material. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt gave a noncommittal reply. She stated she had seen the report but had not yet spoken to the relevant agencies, refusing to name the scientists or acknowledge a coordinated pattern. The exchange left the executive branch in a strange posture, acknowledging the existence of a list of dead and missing national security assets, while simultaneously disclaiming any official understanding of what it means. This lack of a central narrative isn't necessarily a conspiracy. It is the natural output of a system designed to keep secrets by default. Institutions like NASA, MIT, and the national labs operate under layers of medical privacy laws, personnel constraints, and strict classification rules. When an expert vanishes, these policies dictate that the agency release as little data as legally possible. Commentators call this bureaucratic fog. It isn't an overt censorship campaign. It is simply thousands of employees following standard operating procedures. To the families and the public, however, the distinction is meaningless. Rigid compliance looks exactly like silence, leaving a void where the facts of these lives used to be. Inside that void, the families are left to parse the physical and digital anomalies that law enforcement cannot explain. These cases are defined by what investigators call sudden digital silence. After nuclear administrator Melissa Casius vanished in New Mexico, reports surfaced that her mobile devices had been wiped or erased, leaving no forensic trail of her final hours. Mark McCaslin's disappearance was equally quiet, though he achieved it by leaving his devices behind, abandoning his phone and wearables to ensure his movement into the mountains generated zero electronic noise. In both instances, the result is an abrupt truncation of data. These aren't the messy, accidental trails of standard missing person cases. They are precise digital drop-offs. The psychological torture for the families is the slow realization that their loved ones lived inside systems capable of making a person disappear, and those systems are under no obligation to tell them why. The United States employs hundreds of thousands of cleared professionals. In a population that large, random clusters of tragedy are a statistical certainty. But as the expertise narrows, the weight of the pattern shifts. We are seeing a convergence of 3 specific variables: a narrow 3-year window, a shared focus on the most sensitive nuclear and propulsion domains, and recurring digital erasures. This specific overlap is what moves these cases out of the realm of random distribution. Responsibility for these cases is entirely diffuse. Local police focus on the ballistics, labs manage their internal security reviews, and federal field offices track the missing person reports. There is no centralized authority publicly tasked with looking across these institutional lines. This systemic blind spot ensures that even if these events are connected, the apparatus isn't built to see it. America is losing its most critical system knowledge, and the system itself is structurally disinclined to ask why. For the vanished, every hypothesis is a failure. Either they are dead and hidden in plain sight, they were successfully extracted by an adversary, or they chose to walk away from their lives with state secrets in hand. In each scenario, a mind that understood the deep vulnerabilities of the American apparatus has been removed. That specialized knowledge, the understanding of how hardware fails and where the systems are weak, is no longer in our control. They took the mines that built the nuclear stockpile, the fusion reactors, and the rocket engines. The terrifying part isn't where they went. The true horror is what they knew that required them to be erased from the face of the earth.